Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we boil down insights from different sources to get you up to speed, fast.
And today, we're diving into something really specific. Taking principles from, well, conflict resolution and communication and applying them right into the world of barber and beauty education.
Yeah, we looked at an educator's guide, some core principles, even insights from social media.
All sorts of stuff.
So for you educators listening, the mission today is really practical. We want to give you actionable ways to handle, the daily interactions, the conflicts that pop up.
Right. Understanding the underlying issues, setting good boundaries, keeping things positive.
Without adding more stress.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
So one of the first things that jumped out, and this came from TikTok actually, but also the guide, was this idea of noticing signs hidden in plain sight, paying attention to the little things.
Okay, so how does that look in a barber or beauty school setting? Like, what kind of signs are we talking about?
Well, think about a student who's usually really into practicing cuts, but suddenly they're hesitant or avoiding a certain technique.
Or maybe making excuses in a nail class about, like, why they can't get the acrylic right today.
Exactly. These aren't just random blips. They could be signals, frustration building up, confidence dropping, maybe even a clash with another student.
And if you spot that early.
That's the key. You can step in, offer help, maybe adjust something. It's about proactive intervention, stopping things from escalating, which, everyone wants.
Definitely. Okay, let's talk about that balance. Being supportive, being nice, but also keeping order. It's a tough one.
It really is. The sources highlighted this a lot. The guide, social media, it's a common challenge.
So it's not about not being nice.
No, not at all. The point they made was pairing that niceness, that supportiveness, with really clear boundaries, expectations, rules, safety stuff.
Right. Because you can be super encouraging. But if the rules around, say, handling shears or client interactions are fuzzy,
then students might push those limits, maybe not even meaning to sometimes.
And things get messy or unsafe.
Precisely. So those boundaries aren't about being strict just 'cause. They create a predictable, safe space. Everyone knows where they stand.
Stops kindness being mistaken for, like, a free pass.
Exactly. Keeps the focus on learning.
Okay, this next one's interesting. Bias in feedback. One of the TikToks mentioned how we sometimes dismiss stuff just because of who said it.
Oh, yeah. That's a very human thing, isn't it? If you find a student difficult or they always complain.
Your instinct is to just tune them out.
Right. But the advice was push past that. Really listen to the content of what they're saying, even if the delivery isn't great or you don't particularly like the person.
Because they might actually have a point.
Yeah.
Even the student who's always late might spot something genuinely wrong with a process or equipment.
Could be. You might uncover something really valuable for improving your teaching or the program itself that you'd otherwise miss. The source called it learning powerful things.
So being open, even when it's hard.
Basically, yeah. Doesn't mean you have to agree all the time, but just listen objectively.
Okay, let's shift to the educator's own behavior, especially when things get emotional. Modeling composure came up in the guide, and social media too.
Huge point. Leading by example. Things get tense in a hands-on environment, right? Students get frustrated, anxious.
Definitely. Trying to nail a technique, worried about exams, conflicts between students.
And in those moments, how you react, that's a lesson right there. If you stay calm, professional, decent.
It sets the standard. Shows them how to handle pressure professionally, skills they absolutely need.
It really does. It shows maturity, provides stability, often de-escalates things way better than reacting emotionally yourself.
So, the guide and one social post talked about conflict being like a timekeeper. What did you make of that?
It's a fascinating idea that these moments of conflict, dealing with rule-breaking, mediating disputes, even giving tough feedback, they stick in people's minds. They become these significant markers.
Like timestamps. Yeah, I get that. You remember how a boss or teacher handled a tricky situation, good or bad?
Exactly. So for educators, how you act in those moments really shapes how students see you, the whole vibe of the school, even your reputation.
It makes you realize how important being mindful in those moments is. Even small conflicts can have a long shadow.
Very true. Every interaction counts.
Okay, what about when students ask questions or make statements that are kind of based on a faulty premise?
Yeah.
Creating false narratives, the sources called it.
Yes. This requires some careful communication. Someone might try to shift blame or set up a no-win situation with how they phrase something.
Like, if we just had better scissors, my cuts would be perfect. When maybe practice is the real issue.
Exactly that kind of thing. The advice is Don't get pulled into arguing the false premise. Don't defend against it directly.
So what do you do?
You reframe it. Gently redirect back to the core issue, like the importance of practice regardless of the tool. Or you might even need to tactfully challenge the assumption behind their statement.
Keep it focused on reality and progress. Don't get sidetracked.
Precisely.
That links nicely to another idea, shifting from blame to growth, viewing challenges as an assignment.
I really like this perspective. It's empowering, instead of just getting frustrated with a difficult student or situation.
You see it as a task, a problem to solve.
Yeah. It shifts you into active mode. How can I guide this person? What different approach can I try? How can I address this classroom dynamic?
Finding the blessing in the challenge, one source said.
Focusing on teaching, connecting, finding solutions, rather than just, complaining about whose fault it is. Better for the student, better for your own mindset, too.
Makes sense. Now, what about not seeing conflict? The sources warned about thinking everything's fine just because you're disconnected.
Right. That was a key point, especially from the social media stuff. Just because you don't see conflict doesn't mean it isn't there.
You might just be missing it.
Could be. If you're not really engaged, observing, listening to the classroom buzz, subtle tensions or frustrations could be simmering just below the surface.
So, staying connected, keeping those communication lines open is crucial, making sure students feel they can raise concerns.
Absolutely. Silence doesn't always equal harmony.
Okay, let's talk honesty and kindness, that delicate balance. The sources said, honesty that wounds isn't wisdom, but kindness avoiding truth isn't integrity either.
That's a really potent one, especially in skills-based education like barbering or beauty. Giving feedback is essential.
You have to be honest about technique.
You do. But how you say it matters immensely. Harsh criticism can crush confidence.
But being too nice, avoiding necessary correction,
Yeah.
that doesn't help them improve either. It's
Yeah.
a disservice, really.
Exactly. So the goal is that middle ground. Honest, direct feedback, delivered with tact, with kindness. Truthful guidance, mindful of the impact, always aiming for growth, not hurt.
And the sources also acknowledge that this whole process, learning skills, resolving conflict, it's just hard sometimes.
Yes. And it's important to validate that for students. Mastering these crafts is demanding. Dealing with disagreements is taxing. It's okay to struggle.
So acknowledging the difficulty helps.
Definitely. It creates a more supportive atmosphere. Let students know it's normal, that the struggle is part of the journey, and sticking with it pays off.
Building on that support, there was the idea of discernment with empathy.
Right. Empathy is vital, obviously, connecting with students, but discernment adds that layer of wise judgment.
Discernment protects what empathy attracts. That was the phrase, wasn't it?
That's the one. You can feel for a student's situation, but discernment helps you figure out the best way to respond, protect your own boundaries, not get misled.
Like wise kindness, understanding a student's reason for being late, but using discernment to see if it's a pattern versus a one-off emergency.
Exactly. So you can be supportive and maintain standards fairly for everyone.
Which brings us to standards versus forcing accountability. The point was you can't really force someone to be accountable internally.
No, that comes from within. What you can do as an educator is set clear external standards.
For things like attendance, skills, professional behavior, safety.
Yes. Define what's expected. And then consistently apply the consequences or address the issue when those standards aren't met. It's about the external behavior and the established boundaries.
Less about trying to change their internal motivation, more about managing the external actions.
Right. Much more practical and effective.
And for addressing those actions, there was that communication framework. I felt, which caused...
Yeah. Super useful. Assertive, but tactful. It lets you state the impact of behavior without just blaming.
Can you give an example in this context?
Sure, like when you corrected another student's work in front of their client, I felt it undermined their confidence, which caused an awkward moment I had to smooth over.
Okay, yeah. Clear behavior, your feeling, the consequence. Non-accusatory.
Much more likely to lead to understanding and change.
Okay, nearly there. Self-awareness under stress. Understanding how you react when things get tough.
So important. Teaching has stressful moments. Knowing your own triggers, your default reactions when you're frazzled. That's the first step.
Recognizing if you get snappy or withdraw or whatever it might be.
Exactly. Reflecting on past stressful times helps you see those patterns. Then you can consciously work on responding differently, more constructively. Closing the gap between your best self and your stressed self.
And related to that, not using lessons from hard times as rigid rules now.
Mm.
Like, if your own training was super harsh.
Right. Don't just automatically replicate that if it's not actually helpful or appropriate for your students now. Be mindful of the current context. Focus on positive development, not just survival skills you learned back then.
Makes sense. Adapt your approach.
And finally, trust your effective methods. If something works for you, consistently gets good results.
Don't ditch it just because one person complained or prefers something different.
Exactly. Be open to feedback, yes, always. But also trust your experience and what's proven to work in your classroom. Don't let every little comment throw you off course.
Good reminder. Have confidence in what works.
Balance is key. Openness and confidence.
Okay, so quite a journey there. We've covered recognizing subtle signs, balancing niceness with clear boundaries, listening past bias.
Modeling composure, the weight of conflict moments, dealing with false narratives, shifting from blame.
Staying connected, honesty with kindness, validating difficulty, using discernment.
Setting standards, the when you framework, self-awareness, not misapplying past lessons, and trusting what works. Phew.
Yeah, quite a bit. But applying these ideas drawn from all those sources really can lead to better communication, smoother conflict resolution.
And just a more positive, productive learning environment overall for you and your students.
Definitely. So here's a final thought to leave you with. Which one of these principles really hit home for you today? Which one speaks most directly to a challenge you're facing right now?
And consider this. What might change if you intentionally focused on applying just that one principle in your interactions this week? Think about those timekeeper moments. How could a small shift in your response create a ripple effect, impacting not just your students, but your own experience as an educator, too?